We're waiting for the message. Okay, according to this, it says we are live. Welcome, everybody. My name's Curtis Judd, and tonight we have something we're going to call Audio Talk with three of my favorite audio guys here tonight. So, first of all, let me just see how the squares are working here. I think I've got Mike DelGuadio right there. Mike?
It's like a Brady Bunch thing here. Hey, Curtis, thank you for having me. How are you?
Great, and it's great to have you here.
Good,
Why don't you
great to
tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike? How did you get into the voiceover world?
Sure. I think I've told the story a couple of times, but when I was a teenager, early teenager, it was the invention of the infomercial. If you remember the actual, when it went from commercials to infomercials, and invariably at the end of the infomercial, there was a blue screen that said, $3.99 shipping and handling. Call now, 1-800-555-1234. And I wanted to be that guy with the huge voice at the end that you couldn't see. I didn't want to be an actor. I never ever wanted to be on camera. I wanted to be the guy with the huge voice at the end saying, shipping and handling, $3.95. And I wanted to be that guy. And that's all my life. I've always wanted to be behind a microphone. I did radio in college. I thought I wanted to be like a radio DJ, maybe, a morning DJ, a drive time DJ. That didn't pan out. I went and looked at some radio station jobs and I'm like, this is definitely not for me. This is not for me. And then I put it on the shelf for a long time and came back to it as a grown up. I think I'm almost to being a grown up now. And then I started doing voiceover, found a knack for it, found a love for it, and just launched into it. So done it for, 8 or 9 years now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here. All right, just down below me here, we have Mr. Alan. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Alan Williams. I'm a boom operator that works in the film industry.
And
I've been told stay on topic, so not by y'all, but I have a tendency of wandering away from the discussion after talking 15 minutes. Say, what was the question again? So I'm trying to be better.
That was incredibly concise. So I'm going to ask you a follow-on question here. So, boom op, how does one? You are one of the few boom operators that do that full-time professionally that I know in this entire world, and there can't be a whole lot of boom operators that do it full-time. Relative to the overall population of the world. So how does one become a boom operator?
Well, I ended up, I'm not in the LA market or the New York market, one of the big union cities that basically started entertainment in television or film. I'm in one of the smaller markets. I'm in Atlanta. And we ended up falling into it because of the tax incentives that were offered. And I've ended up being in some sort of production since the 90s. I was, early 90s, I was doing public access television. I got a job doing even master control at that public access station. I was doing production, video stuff. My grandmother had a video camera when I was a little kid, and I would make the worst movies you've ever seen. And then over the course of time, she ended up having that camera stolen and got a better camera. And since I was the one using it, she said, what should I get? And I had her get a really good one. So I was having fun just shooting stuff. But then out of high school, I got a job at a production facility with someone who said, if it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good. So he taught me about sound. So, I could have gone in the way of camera or the way of sound, but I got my first opportunity as a boom operator in the sound world on a movie that should be forgotten to the ages, but it ended up getting me going in that world. And then I went full time with it. Oh, geez, I guess 2009 is when I went full time in it, because by then the film industry was thriving here in Atlanta. And I ended up joining the union, becoming one of the first guys that kind of got in at that time that were, at one point, I think there was only like 6 or 7 of us here in Georgia. And then I was one of the first guys to really start getting some of the bigger shows for that reason. So from there, you just start developing your skills and that kind of thing. And as people come in town from New York and LA, you start learning things off of them and, that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I started.
Cool. And you've worked on, I know you're humble enough that you're not going to drop names of shows that you've worked on, but I believe Walking Dead was one of them.
It was,
amongst many others. So good.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're really
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Next up, we have Mr. Bandrew Scott also that runs the Podcastage channel here on YouTube. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
I just yell at people. I yell at people about audio gear, and I stir the pot.
You do stir the pot. You've done a bit of that lately, and it's not just yelling at people. You actually also throw boxes of audio gear and
Verbal and physical assault. Any and all.
any and all. Very good. And how did you get into this? How did you become one of my favorite microphone reviewers?
I don't know. Maybe you're going as crazy as I am, but the reason I started making videos again was because I was looking, when I was researching microphones, I couldn't find the videos with the answers and the tests that I wanted. So I figured, hey, I've played in bands for a few years. I have basic understanding of recording and audio. I can go ahead and give this a shot. And after a few months, it started to gain a little bit of traction, and people started requesting more and more stuff and telling me what I was doing wrong and how to get better. So I've just taken all of that criticism and used it to improve what I was doing. So it's not me who has gotten where I am. It's the people telling me how stupid I am that has gotten me where I am. So I appreciate
Negative
all of them.
reinforcement.
Exactly.
Excellent. And one last question there before we move on to the other discussion items here. How many microphones do you have in your home there?
I thought I was in the 400s, but I was doing some cataloging. I think I'm around 300 microphones at this point.
All right. Yeah. And you've confessed that you have a problem.
No, I don't have a problem. No, not at all.
This is going to be a fun thing. Anyone who's watching this, send him an email and ask if he's ever heard of some vintage, random, crazy microphone, and he'll say, "Oh, geez, I need to find that one and buy it."
No, I don't have a problem. No, what are you talking about?
He's got a credit card with unlimited. He loves buying them.
No credit cards. Don't use credit cards.
Don't use credit cards. Here.
Don't use credit cards.
All right. Well, we have a variety of things ready to go tonight in terms of discussion topics, and I want to jump into our first one here. So if I'm somebody who wants to start recording some really great quality audio, whether it's voiceover, whether it's for video or film, whether it's for podcast, whether it's if I'm playing 90s pop punk, electric guitar. First of all, let's go to you, Mike. What's the first thing that I should consider, or I should, what are the first questions I should ask myself? What are the first things I should do, or should I just dive into starting and buying stuff?
Yes, I mean, I think you should open your credit card and go. No, you don't go for it. No, if anything, now I come from the voiceover world. Bandrew may have a different perspective because there are different booths that have, there are different situations that call for different things. What works for music, what works for singers may not work for instruments. A guitar is different from a voice, and so forth. If I coming to it from the voice world, the thing I learned and the mistake I made in the beginning was I threw money at gear, and it didn't get me the results. If anything, it set me back a little bit. And now my advice is, whenever somebody asks me, I say, if you've got $500 to start your voiceover career, spend $350 of that, $400 of that on your room. Make your room sound good first. A good room can make a cheap mic sound great, but an expensive mic in a bad room will just make it worse. Right? If you buy, this is a reasonably high quality microphone. It's one of my favorite microphones. And it sounded terrible in my first booths because I spent all the money, every dollar I had on the gear, the electronics gear. And really I needed to spend it on my surroundings first. So that's always my first advice is make the room. The room itself is 90% of the sound. I'd say 90% of the sound.
Very good. Okay. What about you, Alan? If someone's going to be doing sound for video, what's your first thought?
Well, that was what I was going to say. Is it depends on what you're doing, because in the world of voiceover, you got to concentrate on the room. But in the world of, like, for example, film, you got to ask yourself, what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be doing a lot of sit-down interviews? And if that's the case, then you might want to get yourself something that's more along the line. Well, first of all, you would have to buy other gear too. So you need to get recorders. And are you going to be doing time code? Are you going to be doing just straight to camera, or do you need a recorder? There's a lot of things you need to think about if you're buying it. Mm-hmm. But in all honesty, are you just talking about one microphone in particular, or what to get regarding that? Because there's a lot of things that in a production world you would need to buy in order to even get going. So a lot of guys I know, if they're starting out, they'll either get a loan from somebody or they'll take out a credit card, or some sound vendors will offer financing. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. But if you're talking about doing production, doing video, you got to ask yourself what kind of microphone is going to serve me best in multiple types of environments. So if I do a sit-down interview in the middle of a big room, or if I'm doing a film and I'm going to have a microphone over someone, are we going to be indoors or outdoors? If you're just starting out and you're talking about a microphone, you might want to get something that's versatile enough to have a little bit of rejection, to have a little bit of reach. You want it to sound good without, reflecting all over the place. And that's really, you want versatility if you're starting out. Let the truth be known, because you're not going to have a huge budget after you spend money on everything.
Yeah. So you talked about a microphone that would have a little bit of reach, that sounds good, it's versatile. What would that microphone be if you were starting today?
Well, you basically, you really can't go wrong with a short shotgun, provided that you understand things like how to tame reflections in an overly reverberant room, things like that. And there you go back to Mike's thing of knowing how to work in an environment, because let the truth be known, it's going to go through post and they're going to be able to do some magic to it anyway. But you want to be able to, if you need to play a foot or so over someone's head exterior, because you have to, because of the sun, or you have to angle in from a different angle, you have to have a microphone that sounds good there and a microphone that sounds good inside. And a lot of the times, the 416, which I know a lot of people are familiar with, the MKH 416 by Sennheiser, that is usually one that you will hear people say every sound person needs to have one in their kit. And that's usually one that they say you really can't go wrong if you start there. But now there's a whole lot of other microphones on the market that you could go with if you have a fixed amount of budget and you don't necessarily want to spend $1,000 in that one realm. Because I tell you, in the past few years, we've gotten a lot of really good microphones hit the market, and you, in all honesty, are not going to be hired because you have one microphone. Most people are not going to be able to tell the difference between one microphone and another. So as long as it is a microphone that is versatile enough and good quality, there are some that are, in the $400 or $500 range that are probably going to fool a lot of people into thinking that it's a lot better than it really is, provided you know what you're doing. Excellent.
Good. All right, now we're going over to our podcast and electric guitar pop punk specialist. Mr. Bandrew, what's the first thing you recommend for people if they're going to do, let's say, podcasting?
Podcasting, I want to give a few questions that I ask and a lot of people in my Discord ask whenever somebody comes in and says, tell me what microphone I need to buy. So we ask them, what's your budget? What are you going to be recording? What is your room like? Do you have treatment? Is it completely untreated? Do you like brighter or darker microphones? Do you have a lot of background noise? Are you okay with the microphone close to your mouth, or do you want it farther away? Are you okay with it in the frame or out of the frame? There are so many questions that come into play that it's difficult to say just this one microphone. But for podcasting, it's almost a meme at this point, but almost every single time, we're almost always going to recommend the Samson Q2U, the ATR 2100 USB, or the AT 2005 USB, because they're all really decent sounding for the price. They're all sub $100, and they're all USB and XLR, so they can start by plugging it directly into their computer. Then if they want to upgrade to outboard gear, a DBX, or just a different preamp or an interface, they can do that without having to replace their microphone. So that's one of the go-to memes at this point. Just buy the Q2U and the ATR 2100.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Well, and an interesting thing about that too is that because those are dynamic microphones, they generally will sound a little bit better in untreated spaces where a lot of beginning podcasters are recording, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And we'll get hate for saying that, but yes, I agree.
It's true.
The reality. It's the reality.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, let's say that our mythical person here that we've been talking about has gotten their start in voiceover, they've gotten their start in sound for film, or they've gotten their podcast is maturing a little bit, and they have a little bit more budget to work with. So we're going to go reverse order this time. So Bandrew, do they need to spend $3,600 and get a Neumann U87 AI?
Of course, yes. Yes, that is going to be the best option for everybody. For Mike, for Alan, for you. Everybody needs a U87. No,
Yeah, this episode is over. It's over.
Just everybody save up, buy the U87. Problem solved. No, there is no one microphone that is going to be universally acceptable or even the best for everybody. For instance, we were talking about the U87. Not all of us think it's the best on each of our voices. So no, absolutely not. I just tried the OC818 from Austrian Audio. People liked that on me more than the U87. I just tried the WA87. People thought that sounded better on me than the U87. And that's a $600 emulation or clone of the vintage U87. So absolutely not. You do not need to spend $3,600 to get that coveted U87 because you may find, hey, it's not the best mic for me.
Yeah. Okay, good. What about you, Alan? What is there an ultimate mic in your mind?
No. I mean, the truth of the matter is you got to know how to use them. And you have to understand at least the basics of your craft. So if you're going to be a voiceover artist, you don't just go, well, I won't jump into Mike's territory, but podcasting, voiceover, film, every one of these things, you got to understand at least the basics of it. There was a video recently on YouTube where a guy completely did not know how to use a microphone, and he talked about how it served really no purpose for him. And he's like, oh, just get the Yeti instead. And I was like, I'm going to write this guy such hate letter. It drove me crazy because it's like, you got to understand at least the basics of audio if you're going to do something regarding it. And so, no, to answer your question, there is not one gospel mic that everybody needs to have, because it really depends on your application. It depends on your budget. It depends on, your voice, if you're doing something specifically with you or with other people. There are microphones that you can get for certain things also, and you just got to understand what you're going to be using that for in order to properly decide what you're going to be using.
Okay, very good. Mike, take us home.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Alan said it best earlier, that there's a lot of microphones that are out that you certainly don't need to spend that much. The manufacturing has gotten there, and there are enough people like emulating some of those reference microphones that now you can, they cannibalize a little of that business, and there are microphones that'll get you to within, let's say 85% of some of those really incredible reference mics. If you spend $3,000 on a Neumann or an AKG 414 or some of those reference mics, have they earned their reputation? Absolutely, they've earned their reputation. They're going to be very versatile mics. They're going to be applicable in a lot of situations, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you gotta go spend your money on. We've all seen the reviews for some of the short shotguns that are come close to something like what a 416 can offer at a third to half to a third of the price. So you definitely don't need to go there. And frankly, I think in my experience, unless you're really being critical to a microphone, you wouldn't know. I've heard, I watched that. Did you watch the One World concert the other day? And we saw Lady Gaga with the backwards microphone. Thank you, Bandrew, for pointing that out when I saw you tweet that. That was amazing. And then Celine Dion had practically a World War II Spitfire engine on her microphone. I think her microphone was like probably $10,000 or $15,000. It might be right for her. And then Elton John had I think he had a SM58, I think is what he was using. And they all sounded reasonably good. They all sounded acceptably good. And I don't want that to be, I think you could probably do a podcast with a couple of SM58s. No problem. So you don't need to spend that gear. There is gear that you can use that will be right in practically whatever budget you will have. You don't need to go crazy. You don't need to go crazy on it.
Okay. I'm dying to ask you, because you've reviewed a lot of microphones. All of you guys have reviewed a bunch of microphones. But Mike, when you're doing a paid job, which mic do you typically use? Or is it all a whole bunch of different mics?
My first choice, always the mic that I think sounds the absolute best for me, versatility-wise, and it's as much the sound as it is the use is the 416. I go to the 416 first for two reasons. Sounds great. I'm very comfortable with the way it sounds. I really like the way it sounds in my voice. But for voice work, one of the great advantages for that is it's up and out of the way of my copy. Whereas if I've got a condenser microphone, I'm usually like this on the microphone and I'm looking through my pop filter at my copy, or I'm trying to look up through it and, got my glasses on and so forth. So my first choice is the 416. And if I didn't have the money for a 416, I'd be using like one of the Deity mics, because the Deity mics are really, really good right now. And then I go from there. If I'm not getting what I need for the paid gig there, then I might switch to this is my old E100. This is one that I go to. I have a U87 and I've got a TLM103 and I've got a bunch of different microphones that I've aggregated over time. And if I don't like the way I'm sounding on my first choice, then I'll go and try other things. But it's the mic, it's the preamp, it's the plugins, it's the settings, it's what I'm listening to on the headphones, it's how I master it. It's not just, we know it's not just the microphone,
Right.
But the 416 is my first choice.
Interesting. And for that, it's interesting because it does sound good on your voice, but it's this practical element of it that you love so much,
Yep.
that you can read your copy.
Yeah.
And
It's got to be
most of us
comfortable.
don't think about
You
it.
got to
Yeah.
be comfortable, especially if you're doing long form audiobooks. If you're going to look through a pop filter, for 4 hours, it can be exhausting. It can affect your performance. It can make you do more reads and all of that stuff. So comfort in the booth is important, because it's going to get you a better performance, even if the mic is maybe not 100% ideal, super perfect.
Yep.
I'll take a 5% reduction in sound quality for a 50% improvement in my comfort.
Cool. Let's then, while we're on the topic of comfort, let's talk about headphones for just a minute. So Bandrew, down to you. Let's talk first of all, what headphones what are you using tonight there?
Tonight, I am using the Sony MDR 7506s. That's what I use to always track with. Very detailed and crisp, so I can hear every mouth click and just scream at myself internally while I'm recording.
I so want to make some mouth clicks just to drive you crazy.
No, don't you do it. Oh, God. Oh, no.
Just for you.
That's a technical foul.
Yes.
On sound speeds. That's a yellow card.
2-minute timeout.
The first of many, I'm sure.
Oh, wow. So okay, while we're on the topic then, are the 7506s accurate?
They are fairly bright, so they're not flat. I wouldn't say they're sterile. They are very bright headphones. So if you're looking for a perfectly flat 100,000% accurate representation of your recording, probably not going to get it out of these. You would need some studio monitors for that.
Okay, excellent. And then Alan, over to you. What do you typically have as far as cans when you're out on set?
When I'm on set, I like the same exact headphones, the Sony MDR 7506s. You can get them modified, like True Audio's. I think it's Remote Audio. They can even get it fitted with a little Shure, gooseneck type microphone that comes around. And those are pretty common amongst boom operators because they're closed ear, but they still allow you to hear the outside world. So if you have your boom over your head, you can very quickly and easily, well, I can't do it with these because these aren't 7506s, but you can do the shoulder move like this and knock it off one ear so you can hear what's around you. And that's a nice thing. So, I can't do it in here, but that's a very nice thing to be able to do. And so if I'm listening, I can hear optimum fidelity. I can hear, because they're brighter also, like Bandrew said, I'm also able to hear details and stuff in the background that you wouldn't be able to hear with a flat pair. Mm-hmm. But whenever I'm doing stuff for, recording in here, I want to have it more close. So I can hear more of my own voice. So if I'm doing something where I want to hear others, I like the 7506s so I can hear outside noises. If I'm in here, then I like the ones I'm wearing right now, the Audio-Technica ATH, M50X, ATH M50X headphones. And that's what I like. So eventually, like another thing that you also need to run into is occasionally, a lot of people will like IEMs, inner ear monitors. Mm-hmm. And I've tried a whole bunch of those. And honestly, at some point, I'll probably end up jumping on the there's a great company here in Atlanta called Empire Ear, and I'll probably grab a pair of those because they make some really high quality, good IEMs. And I'll probably jump in that world at some point, but probably not full time on them because it's still like hearing the outside world, and IEMs plug up your ears.
Yep. Yep.
I remember being on a gig once, and I was talking to the recording engineer who was recording me doing some commercials, and we were talking about the 7506s because they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and I was commenting, I find them both difficult to listen to and uncomfortable to wear. They take a lot of break in, and he said, I don't wear these because they sound good. It's my magnifying glass. If I'm a photographer, I've got the photography loop so I can go look at the negatives. He's like, I can hear what I need to hear to know if it's right or wrong. If it's detailed in the right way to make it so that I can hear what I need to hear. So it was very much, I think it's very much a tool specifically for a use in that case. So even though they do have a very distinctive, crazy bright sound, they'll make every other headphone sound like this after you listen to the 7506s. I think they do have a very specific use.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I add
And
one thing to that?
Yeah.
Real quick. If you get 7506s, you should probably also look into replacing the actual earmuffs, or if you don't, then get something like headphone softies to go over, because if you do any kind of exterior work in the sun and you start sweating, your ears will stick to those kind of pleather type headphones, and that will just leave all these little black particles all over your ears. So putting something like headphone softies on, they're cold when they're cooler when it's hot out, they're warmer when it's cold out, and they just feel so much more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think another point too that Mike, I know you brought up in the past as well regarding the 7506s in particular, is that for some people they're on ear basically, and for other people they're over ear, and so it really depends on the size of your ear. I think what it comes down to me too is that this is a lot like microphones. Like, you have to find a set that's going to work for you, and unfortunately that means you got to shop around a little bit and figure out what that's going to be.
Yep. And when you find the ones that you like, I've learned that if you save up, you buy an extra pair because they'll go out. They may go out of production. I've got my favorite are my favorite for in the booth are the Sennheiser HD 380 Pros, and they haven't made them for 2 years. So when I heard they got discontinued, I dug into my piggy bank and I bought an extra pair so that I can continue to wear something for a long time. I've since found a couple of other headphones that are good backups, but still the 380 Pros have been by far, they don't sound the best, but they have been by far and away the most comfortable. And when I'm in there, comfort is absolute king.
Yeah, it is. And because your sessions don't last 15 minutes. How long is a typical session in a day?
I could be in there for 4 hours. I might have the headphones on for 4-5 hours at a time. Audiobooks, I mean, I'll go until my voice starts to change. It could be hours upon hours. And like if I wear 7506s, after like 30 minutes, my ears are killing me. But my 380 Pros, because the cups are like this big, they don't touch my ear. They don't touch my ear at all. So that's why I like those. They're not very true. They're not really great for mixing. I have a different set of headphones for when I'm mixing and doing the critical listen, but in there it's a tool for my comfort. I need to be able to just to hear myself, and so comfort's number one for me in there.
Yep, that makes sense. Let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk about audio interfaces and/or recorders. So Bandrew, let's start with you.
Okay.
You're using what are you using to record typically? If of all the things you have, what's the number one you go to and why?
Okay. The number one, it's a number one and number 1.1.
Okay.
The Universal Audio X8 or the Universal Audio Twin X. And the reason I like those is the preamps are excellent, the A to D and D to A conversion, excellent, but mainly the plug-in ecosystem. I am a huge fanboy of Universal Audio's emulations of all of the classic gear that is prohibitively expensive. So I can get an LA2A for free, essentially, well, with the cost of the interface. And if I wanted the outboard gear, that would be $3,500 or $4,000. And it's probably not an exact replication of the analog gear, but it gets you close enough. So it's mainly the plug-in ecosystem that I have just fallen in love with and spent way too much money on. So I am stuck in the universal audio ecosystem, and I'm happy to be there for now.
Okay. Okay, cool. And then Alan, what about you?
When I am doing like right now, I really do love the Sound Devices Mix Pre 6. I've loved it since it came out. I was actually, when I was researching for what I was going to use on my channel and what I was going to be doing on my computer, I delayed for quite a while because I was trying to figure out what was going to suit my purposes without spending a fortune on something that was going to be $4,000 in great preamps and stuff, but then not interface with my computer. And then all of a sudden Sound Devices announced the Mix Pre 6. And personally, I love the thing. It's a great unit. It's extremely quiet. And the best thing that I really like about it too is I can quickly grab it and run out with it and do a location shoot. So if I'm doing a location shoot, I can have the exact same recorder with me at all times. And when I do a lot of my presentation videos for my channel, I don't even have to have my computer on. So I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I just simply hit record and go at it. That's it. And so I just love the thing. It's wonderful.
Excellent. Excellent. How about you, Mike?
I am a tried and true. I'm an Audient guy, and I have been for a long time. And I didn't intend to become that. It's just that the piece I use an ID22 as the main brain for my control system, and what has been magical about that piece of equipment it has grown. You can start with the ID22, an XLR cable, and your mic, and you could make a career on that. But it also has grown, and there's been nothing I've been able to throw out that I've been able to stump it. I now have external monitors. I've got headphones in two different rooms. I've been able to do talkback. I've been able to do directed sessions. I've got not less than 15 preamplifiers sitting right here. The ID22 handles them all. I've got different, it's grown and grown, and so far I haven't stumped it, and yet it still is only taking up this much space on my desk. It has absolutely grown, and the default preamps are great. I love this piece of equipment. I love it, and hopefully it never goes out of production, but I bought a spare one just in case, because once you find something, and I can touch type with this stuff, you know what I mean? I can run this whole thing. I can run all of this stuff without even looking at it, which makes me more productive, makes it so that I can work faster and more efficiently by knowing the equipment. So the ID22 has just been magical for me.
Cool. Let's talk about if somebody's starting out and they don't have quite the budget for some of the gear we've talked about today. Over to you, Bandrew. What would you recommend as maybe a starter audio interface?
A starter audio interface. There's the Behringer UM2, the Behringer UMC22, the Behringer UMC202 HD, the Behringer UMC204 HD.
Okay.
If you don't want to go Behringer, Focusrite, you could do. One of my favorites right now is the Motu M2, but that's around $150. That's probably towards the upper end of a beginner budget. So if you're able to swing that and you already have your room treated and you already have your mic picked out and you have a few extra bucks and you can swing the Motu M2, that thing's insane. Or the SSL2 and 2 Plus, that's really up towards the top. Mm-hmm. But probably the Motu would be my pick.
Yeah, and they have a special button on those too, don't they, on the SSL?
Yeah.
The magic make you sound amazing button?
Yeah, the 4K button. So it automatically means your audio is compatible with 4K video. So you know it's good.
Joke. It's a joke, people. Don't buy it for that. Definitely not for that. Alan, what's your thought if someone's getting started?
If you're talking about interfaces and stuff, I think Bandrew nailed it. If you're talking about something that you could use as an interface and do some sound, like for film or video, then I would probably say that one of the most recent things that I've heard about that I think is really fascinating is that the DD-HD TX, if you upgrade the firmware to version 2.0, it now functions as a USB audio interface. So not only can you use it, it's not got all the features that, you're probably wanting from a full interface, it doesn't have loopback and that kind of stuff to my experience. I've not actually tried it just yet, but this is what I've heard. However, you could still take that and go out in the field, use it as a recorder.
Yeah.
So you could put it on a microphone and you could still record with it in the field without needing a computer. So it's versatile in that aspect too. So that's
Excellent.
the way that I would probably lean. Now, granted, it is what, about $250? So you would spend a little bit of money on it, but it's extremely versatile. So
Yeah, something that could serve for a while. Definitely. Mike, what about for a beginning voiceover artist?
Yeah, for the beginning voice artists, I mean, there's always like the standards. There's the Focusrite Scarletts that are always reasonably good. You see a lot of pros use them in their home studios. It's gonna be totally fine. I think two of you have tested, maybe all of you have tested the new Audient Evo. That looks very, very promising. I have one, but I haven't finished my review of it yet. I'm
Spoiler alert.
Late. Yeah, I'm very late on doing that. Hey, life. But because I'm an Audient fan, I think that like $129 for that seems like a really good option. Something you can grow into. I like some of the AI features that are being built into this new equipment. The sound devices. The new one that's got like the 32-bit recording that it's essentially you can't clip. Some of that stuff is really, really cool. But I think, the very basics of it, I think Bandrew had some good ones with the Behringer series. The Behringer series, they're surprisingly good at their price point. As in my situation, a lot of people that I talk to, because they can't be near their computer when they record, a lot of people, use the, this is always on my desk, the Zoom H5. Not the best preamps, but they're very passable preamps, but it works because it's a remote recorder and it can be an interface on your desk, and it doesn't put you up in the sound device's price point, but it's still, a little on the expensive side. There are some ones that I've seen from Centrance that have pretty good preamps that can be battery operated, so they can be, remote and stuff. But, if you're looking at the sub $100, I think Bandrew had it right with the Behringer series. That's what I think.
Seems to be a theme. Yeah, good. All right, now another type of question here. So we'll go to Alan first this time. When it comes to recording great sound for film, how much of the overall equation is attributable to gear versus the skill of the person making the recording?
Now, this is one that I had to think about.
Okay.
Because it's very easy to say, like I've been on shows before, or I shouldn't say shows. I did an infomercial a few years ago, I should say. And it was a one-man band. So it was just me, and I had the recorder, and we were using a few channels of wireless out. And that particular location was across from the CDC. And instantly, at one point, all of the RF in the area went spiking through the roof, and we could not figure out why. So all of my wireless went completely dead. Then what I did is I had a boom with me. I said, who wants to be the audio mixer? Someone come over here, and I've set it all up. I hit the record button, and I boomed the whole thing, the rest of it. So it's easy for me to say, oh, it's the gear, because, it's 90% gear and 10% skill, except for the fact that I set all that up and I made it work through skill. So it's one of those things where you keep saying, oh yeah, if you have the gear, then you can hit record. That's what a lot of people want you to believe. The fact of the matter is, there are crises that happen, and you got to know what to do in those circumstances. So in all honesty, thinking about it, taking into consideration everything, I would say it's probably 10% gear and probably 90% skill. And just to elaborate a little bit on that is, a lot of times people can't tell if you're using this microphone or this microphone. I used to do a series called, and I still probably might do some more in it, called Masked Mics, where I would take two microphones, I'd cover them up. You don't know what they are. I'd graphically cover them up, and I'd talk into them and then say, which do you prefer and what would you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10? Sometimes people would pick the $100 microphone over the $2,000 microphone. Some people would say, oh no, this has got to be the one, and they would choose the more expensive one. So really, if you're doing critical listening, that's when you're going to hear those things if you're listening, and that's if you hear them at all. But a lot of the times, it's if you set a proper level, if you know how to properly gain stage, if you know how to properly ride your levels, you know how to get a microphone close and position it where if it's a lav, it's not scratchy. You have all those things that require skill to get it done properly. If you do all that, then it should be, if all goes well, as easy as hitting the record button. So I would say 90% skill, 10% gear.
Okay. Do you know this guy? Can you see the little thing on the screen?
I'm not looking at the screen, but who am I looking at?
I was just gonna point to that.
This is Michael Wynn says, to get pro results, you need the skill and the gear, period. You know anything about that guy?
Michael Wynn. Yeah, I worked for him for about a year and a half. Love the guy. He's great. Michael, thanks for coming out here and checking it out. And Michael and I were, it's one of those things we joked about. I would say, hit the record button and leave this to me when I'd go out there and boom some stuff, and usually it was coverage or something like that. But at the same time, occasionally we would run into a circumstance where producers would say, can you make this happen? And that's when he would have to pull out skills that you don't get from just, walking off the street and saying, can I hit the record button? You have to pull from that skill set and your experience and your training. So, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, as long as you have good gear and you have the know-how, you're going to get good results. But honestly, what I would say is, for the most part, if you're skilled, you could get good results with anything. Some of the best work, when I had absolutely no budget, when I was a teenager, I did some of the most creative stuff I've ever done in my life. When I was like pushing gear to its limits and saying, what can I do to make this look better and sound better? Mm-hmm. That was when I did some really cool stuff. And then when I got a budget, I'm like, well, now it's easy, because I've worked that creative in, and the creative juices naturally flow. Then you get the gear and you can oh, well, now I can make it look even better now or sound better. So, But yes, he's exactly right. It takes both. But personally, I would say that it's a lot. Because that even goes into the whole making it sound good. I'd say 90% of that goes into the making it sound good so that you can hit record and it naturally works.
Yeah, good.
There was a comment that went by just below Michael's. It says, Joshua says, skill comes from experience. Experience comes from experimentation, experimenting a lot. And I think that's very much encapsulating what Alan is saying. And I think what a lot of us go through is I'd love to say that, it's, the gear helps and the skill helps. But I think as much of it is, when I'm in a session, I don't ever want the director, whoever I'm working with, to stump me. Right. I want to be able to, if I can come in confident that I know my job, I know what to do, then I know how to get the most, at least to the limits of my knowledge, the most out of the equipment. If you're coming in and you're paralyzed with fear because you don't know what you're doing, then it's, you got to gain that experience before, because otherwise, unskilled can make great gear perform terribly. Right. We certainly have, we've seen that. And so I definitely think that experimentation, the word that resonated with me in that comment was experimentation. Experiment while you're learning. Try things. I was talking to somebody today and I was like, I've torn that booth down and I've put it back together 5 different times. I've torn my control room down. I cannot be afraid to rewire it, to move it around. And I learn a lot. And I think if I can get incrementally one little tiny bit better, I'm going to be better. It's all going to get better. And I'm less likely to get stumped or challenged or locked up with fear in the middle of doing something because I don't know what's happening. I want to gain that experience in advance.
Yeah. Have that in your skill set, just ready to go. Yeah, for sure. All right. What about in this the podcast studio, Bandrew?
Well, there's a music saying that a good guitarist can make any guitar sound good. So I think that Alan took the easy way out by saying 90 and 10. I'm going to say 91 and 9. I think 91% skill, 9% gear. And
my 90% skill is more than your 91%.
And we saw a perfect example of this during that live stream concert. These are people with some of the best gear that you can buy. Classic gear that most studio engineers would kill for. Hopefully not, but they might. And we saw how some of those performances sounded. And then we conversely saw some people who understood the gear. They didn't have a $20,000 microphone. They had a $2,500 or $3,000 microphone. They understood how to set it up, how to mix it properly, and it sounded phenomenal. So I think the majority of it comes down to skill, because you can make a $50 Q2U sound good. You can make a $100 AT2020 sound good. But you can also make a $3,000 microphone sound like absolute trash. So you need to have the skill to actually understand how to use the gear that you have. Throwing money at a problem won't solve it and won't make you sound good.
Yeah.
Good point. We have another question that came in here from our audience here. This is a good one, I think. Do you think that using a recorder with 32-bit float technology helps beginners, keeps beginners from learning the basics of gain staging? Oh, Bandrew has an opinion. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think that when you're starting out, it's good to get a good understanding of how to set your gain properly. If you just have these training wheels on all the time, you're never going to learn how to ride the bike. You need to understand what clipping is. You need to understand the procedure for setting your gain so you don't clip. But I know somebody else in here has strong opinions about 32-bit. Oh, yes. So I'll throw it over there.
That must be Mike. No, it's in all honesty, to me, it's been around for a long time. It's not been around for just the past year since the F6 came out and they were like, oh, 32-bit float. It's been around for a lot longer than that. There's even 64-bit floating point if you really want to get technical about that. Is everyone going to go out there and start recording in 64 now that I mentioned it? Hopefully not, because in all honesty, remember how we just got through saying it's skill? You don't need to just set your levels and walk away from them. You need to understand how to set them so they're going to work with you. Back in the days of analog audio, you only had 14 to maybe 18 decibels of dynamic range. Now you have upwards of 40 or 50. And that's, if you're, and that's it. That's if you're not even trying hard. So you can get great results, even if you don't drive nearly as hard on your preamps. You don't have to have it because you can get great results without it. And in all honesty, I would much prefer to have someone that knows how to set a level than someone that says, okay, going to turn this into 32-bit floating point and hit record. Because to me, it gives you more, it's going to be more difficult. For example, if you try doing that in the film world, you then have to put it out to the context. And you could say, I'm going to set an average level to it. But if you're doing a quiet scene, it's not going to necessarily raise your level. So that way it's going to be one of those things people are going to be turning up their context at Video Village because you're not actively, gaining it up in their headphones. There's a lot of little things like that you really don't need to use it for. And as a matter of fact, I've been talking about this for months now, but I've actually written a video that I'm going to be doing about 32-bit floating point. And in all honesty, I just don't, I think I don't want to say a fad because I see it as having certain uses, but I think people are relying on it more and thinking it's more than it really is.
Okay. Fair enough.
Let me bring back music again. What is one of the biggest critiques of musicians now? They're not real musicians. They just throw auto-tune on everything. And I think a lot of people in the music industry that are coming up may think, oh, well, I don't really need to spend 2 hours a day singing and practicing. I'll just throw auto-tune on in the studio and everything will be fine. So I think it's not the exact same, but a similar idea. Because there are these safety measures in place, you don't need to put in the time to actually learn what you're doing.
You're going to mention
same level.
You're going to mention a musician. I might as well mention special effects recording like gunshots. It's not interesting unless you push the levels a little bit and it distorts and clips a little bit. If you're doing gunfire, for example, if it's perfectly within your levels, it doesn't have that hard smack and impact. So, 32-bit, I'm going to turn that on so I don't clip. Honestly, you want to push those levels a little bit. I've talked to quite a few very, very skilled and talented and top-notch effects recordists that go out into the field and record some stuff, and they always tell me the same thing. They say, push the threshold on loud stuff. It's got to have that smack, otherwise it sounds soft. You don't want to have that on things like gunshots, for example.
Right, good. What about in the voiceover booth? While we're on the hot topic of 32-bit float, what do you think, Mike?
I'll actually confess it. I don't know that much about it. I look at it in the larger context of, and I'll probably take the devil's advocate position here that I don't really care if it makes my job easier and I don't clip and I can still get a great performance out of it. I'll take it. And I think of it from the same thing that I'm sure there were engineers that going, what the hell is this Pro Tools for? I'm fine with a razor blade and my analog console, right? And they were railing against whatever piece of technology that, and certainly the gear that I have. I wouldn't be doing this job if I was still recording to tape and it required, what studios of 40 years ago needed. It may be that in 20 years it'll be like, wait a minute, you guys only had 40 decibels of dynamic range. We've got 100, whatever it is. So I totally can appreciate that in the same sentence that I say, if you're going to learn a skill, you want to learn the skill from the ground up. I still think we have an obligation ourselves to know as much as we can from the ground up. But I don't necessarily want to rail against a piece of technology for the piece of technology. It's the same thing. Are we better or worse at our computers because we have the modern interfaces? Was it better for the people who came up and they actually had to learn the command line before they learned the Windows interface because they knew more about the guts and the internals of their computers? And now it's all abstracted away and we don't do anything with it. It's I think there are arguments for or against. It's a piece of technology. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. You can use it as a crutch. You can use it as a tool. I think there's probably application for it. If I need it in the voiceover world, if it can help me do my job, I'll probably do it. I don't know.
DOS all the way.
I'm going to add one more little thing here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying turn off your limiter and go out and go wide open and just, not doing that kind of thing if you're recording gunshot. You still have to understand what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But, I'm just saying that there's people that skilled out there in recording sound effects and stuff that would
that's why you're basically using the limiter as an effect, right? I mean, it's a skilled application of that tool.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a tool. Yeah. Just like everything else, it's a tool.
Cool. All right, we have a question here. Before anyone answers this question, we're going to take some guesses here. Let's first of all take a guess as to which microphone Mr. Bandrew here is using. Go ahead and sound that off in the chat here. Then it's going to be a little bit harder with Alan because we don't see anything. And then tell us which mic you think Mike is using, and then tell us which mic you think I'm using here. I think mine's probably the most obvious one, but maybe not. We'll see. All right. All right. While we're waiting for those to come in here, one last question. What types of gear would you advise new soundies not to invest a lot of money in? So let's start with you, Bandrew.
That's a very difficult question because there are use cases for most pieces of gear. Mm-hmm. The one piece of advice to answer this question that I could give is don't buy a piece of gear because it has a flim flam and a bling blong and a boop boop. Buy the piece of gear that has what you need. Don't look at a piece of gear and say, oh, well, it has these 20 additional features as well. I'm going to buy that and spend a lot more money on it. If you don't need the features, don't waste your money on it. Except that you might need to grow into something, though. If you think you might need a few more mics, look for an interface with a few more mics. If you think you might need some additional polar patterns, look at a microphone that might have a few additional polar patterns. But don't buy into the hype, all the marketing material saying, this has a flim flam, a bloop blop, and a boobly boo.
I swear by my boobly boo.
I know. I knew you would. I knew you would, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. And then, Alan, what's your advice?
Well, the first thing that went through my mind is don't buy a USB microphone because I just personally don't like them. But, there are applications that people would want to use them. But I personally, if you're thinking about it from the film point of view, I would say if you're novice, you don't really need to buy gear because you're most likely going to be working for someone that will be providing it. If you're a sound mixer, obviously you need to have it. But by the point that you've gone through being a sound utility and a boom operator, you will have accrued the right gear that you're going to be happy with for your workflow. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about like for video and that kind of thing, I would say if you're not a technical person, avoid things with firmware, especially if it's brand new. The reason I say that is because there's quite often do I see someone that buys the brand new whatever, it just came out. Why is my level jumping up and down? Why is it that suddenly it changes channels on me? Why is it that I could have sworn I set my gain at this, but it's not, it's like because you hit something wrong. You didn't bother learning that that if you went into the menu in this place, that's how you do a shortcut over here. So if you're not technical, I would say try to get something that I don't want to say is dumb, but something that more foolproof, something that doesn't have a brain built into it. Keep it simple.
Okay, good. Mike, what about you for the voiceover artists? Oh.
I do not believe in egg crate foam. That's if I had to. This is the one thing I tell everybody: is this actual stuff, this stuff. That's if I had to say one thing. I see so many people that I'm like, one, they're taking half the mass away for the thing that it's supposed to. I don't believe in the egg crate foam. I feel like there are some things that are out there that feel a little snake oily. The Chaotica eyeball. When I first saw the Chaotica eyeball, I'm like, what? What is that? I mean, there are some things that are like, trying to put, magic in a box and sort of ignoring maybe the laws of physics. Those are some of the things, acoustic treatment. I think there's a lot of misconception about what the purpose of acoustic treatment is, and you can get sucked into trying to save money, underplay it, when really you can. Some of the best stuff is some of the cheapest stuff. Like, go to Home Depot and buy some mineral wool, 3 inches thick, nice and heavy, costs $50 for like 20 square feet or whatever it is. It's going to serve you way better than buying these little, 2-foot squares that are going to cost you a fortune. I don't believe in the egg crate foam. So sorry, I'm going to get specific on that one. But I mean, otherwise I think that the advice that I've heard here has been really good. And no, that was not right. That whoever said the E100S, this is not the E100S.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about microphones then. Mike, you're up first then. What are you working tonight?
This is just the plain old E100. This is the vintage one. This is from the 90s. It's the original of that series, the E100. But yeah, I mean, otherwise you would never be able to tell. They look identical. The E100S is a perfectly good guess, but it was the E100.
Okay, very good. And why did we choose that tonight as opposed to your 416, your beloved 416?
The 416's in there, and it's hooked up because I'm in the middle of an audiobook project, so it's in there. It's in use right there. But I've also, I've got a bunch of different mics. This one happened to be nearby. I trust this mic. I knew it would sound good. I wanted a mic that would be in camera. I wanted a mic to be in camera because I also I also have like a shotgun mic that lives right here. It's right here, just out of frame. But I wanted a mic that was in camera in case we did this.
Cool. All right, Alan, what are you working with tonight?
Well, I'm actually using the CAD Equitech E100, also the vintage model. And it's funny that you went to Mike first, because when I was researching my channel and was going for certain sounds, I saw his video where he compared it to the E100 to the E100S. I'd been looking for a flat microphone that I thought didn't bother embellishing things. It was just what it is. Because personally, I like flatter sounds on microphones. And when I heard that, I said, you know what? I'm going to buy one of those. And this is before that video went viral and drove the living tar, that price, for the vintage E100 through the roof, which is one thing that y'all can thank Mike about, because the video is amazing and it drove the price for that microphone through the roof. And I got mine well before that happened. And it's been right here, with exception of a few videos. I think some of my earlier ones, I was trying a couple of different microphones. But he says he likes to have his microphone in frame. I don't like having a microphone in front of my face. You can see I like to talk with my hands. Now, granted, that's the difference between what you're hearing out of my voice and Mike's. I mean, Mike can sound great on anything. God himself has Mike's demo work on his demo reel.
Yeah, Alan, keep telling yourself that the only reason you don't sound like Mike is the microphone placement.
It's all the microphone.
Hold on a second. My voice is high enough that it disrupts the flight patterns of bats that are using their sonar. It throws them off when they're flying around. And that's the instruments that I have versus Mike. But that's the difference also in having a microphone that is this far away and having one that's right close. It's the same exact microphone. So, but it's that versatile. So it's cool that I really like the sound of that microphone. I've ventured away from it for a couple of times, but I always come back to it because I love the way it sounds.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Bandrew. What is that very, very unique looking microphone from where I'm sitting? It looks really cool. I think you win for the looks. Tonight.
Exactly. Yeah. You buy microphones and all of your audio gear based on looks. And for anybody, that's sarcasm. That is sarcasm.
I just love that you told Bandrew he won for looks.
Yeah. This is the Manly reference cardioid. And the reason it's on the stand is I use microphones for like 2 months, 3 months before I do a full review on them, mainly for the larger ticket items, and this is not a cheap microphone. So I'm guessing this will be on the stand for maybe 3-4 months The U87 AI was on the stand for 4 months, I think. And it was hard to take that one down because I want to use them as much as possible to get my money's worth. So I don't just make a single video with them. Because that would be wasteful, wouldn't it? That would be bad spending habits. To buy a $3,600 microphone for a single video, that would be stupid.
I wonder who would do that.
I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
So the Manly is how much? Run that by me again.
This is 3,000.
It's a bargain. A bargain at only 3,000.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This
And it
is
makes you
child's
sound
play.
so manly.
Exactly. If only.
I mean, I thought that
I'll
was
tell
looking
you.
at Don LaFontaine.
If there was a mic that made every guy sound like Mike, that would be the best-selling microphone of all time. They could sell it for 10 grand. People would buy it.
Yes, they would.
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys are sweet.
There's a market opportunity there, people. For anyone watching,
Get on
you
it.
can do something like that. All right.
It's called Liar Bird.
Liar Bird.
Right? One of the AI things is going to be able to imitate all of our voices.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that. Ooh, that's a rough one. Tonight we are working with the Shure SM7B. I do have also the Electro Voice RE20, which somebody guessed. This is actually the SM7B. This, by the way, I just want to, Bandrew and I talked about this a little bit. This is a mic that is extraordinarily popular, but I don't think it's a good mic for everybody. I think it's a good mic for people with extraordinarily bright voices that need to tame that down just a little bit.
Totally
And it's
agree.
good. It's good when you're in a situation where you may not have a lot of acoustic treatment in your room, or the room may not be a great sounding place. This is going to work a little bit better in those circumstances. So, there it is. Okay, we're going to go around the Hollywood squares here one last time as we sign off. So, Bandrew, anything you wanted to share before we sign off here?
Just have fun recording stuff, and if you want me to yell at you, you can find all of that at podcastage.com or bandrewscott.com, and I will yell at you all day long.
And if you're not already subscribed to Podcastage, the channel here on YouTube, you should probably do that as well. All right, Alan.
Do what you love. Seriously, it doesn't matter if you're podcasting or doing voiceover or making a video or film project. Do what you love. Do the aspect of it that you love. Have fun with it. Because if you're not, then I don't know what you're bothering doing.
Yeah, life's not long. You got to enjoy it. Definitely. Mike.
Practice, critique, but do what you enjoy, so that you can enjoy it, so that you can create, so you can get better at it, so that you can do it. That's my advice, everybody. Experiment, practice, critique, try again. Don't give up. You'll get better. You'll get better. You'll get better.
Excellent. All right. And and throw. Where did that box go? It just disappeared.
It disappeared.
Okay.
That was like it's escape velocity.
Okay, very good. We forgot to mention, so for Alan's channel, Sound Speeds here on YouTube, and of course for Mike, Mike is Booth Junkie here on
Booth
YouTube.
Junkie, yeah.
So if you guys were not already aware of their channels, all of them fantastic content, lots of great information on making the world a better sounding place. So thanks everybody for joining. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
All right. See you guys.